Xiaomo crossed the school courtyard with his mind racing. Tomorrow's mock exam weighed heavily on his shoulders, and the silence of the empty hallways only increased the pressure. By his side was the embodiment of perfection, Xiaoxi. She wasn't just the most stunning face on campus. She was an academic genius and heir to a business empire. When they parted ways, her encouragement sounded like music, but reality hit right after. Pedaling home, the boy faced the raw truth. He was the definition of average, while she orbited a universe of success and prestige. The malicious whispers of classmates echoed in his head, questioning how such an unequal pair could even exist. His insecurity felt bottomless. With mediocre grades and an uncertain future, the idea of them attending the same university seemed like a delusion. He felt like an extra trying to star in an impossible romance. Everything changed in an instant. In the refuge of his bedroom, a metallic voice announced the start of a system. The shock sent him stumbling away from his chair. A blinding light filled the room, forcing him to shield his eyes. Out of nowhere, a female figure materialized with a bombshell announcement. Activation successful. Frozen in disbelief, Xiaomo backed toward the closet, gripping a ruler like a sacred sword. The visitor, impatient with his amateur reaction, explained that he was facing the most advanced technology on the planet. This wasn't a game, it was a golden opportunity. To stop being a mere user and take control, he would have to pass rigorous tests. The first mission hit like a punch to the gut, reached the top 10 in his class. Faced with the boy's skepticism, he felt closer to rock bottom than the top. The assistant was ruthless. If the goal wasn't met, the system and everything that came with it would be deleted. As panic rose in his throat, Xiaomo felt a sudden heat surge through his veins. An overwhelming energy was awakening, and the ordinary boy was about to be left behind. The assistant was blunt. This was only a free sample, a starter kit with a 30-day expiration. His future was now tied to his own sweat. Before vanishing, she left behind an air of mystery, hinting at a soon reunion. Paralyzed, Xiaomo watched a floating screen appear in the empty space, listing his personal data as if he were a video game character. It felt unreal, but reality hit hard when he realized the real trump card. The system had boosted his brain with an absurd photographic memory. Sitting in front of his books, his heart pounded. He decided to bet everything. When he opened the first page, the words didn't just pass through his eyes, they burned into his mind like hot iron on leather. A shout of euphoria escaped him. The system was real. He could truly absorb every detail instantly, but the cost of failure was deadly. If he failed the mission, the price would be a return to mediocrity. He would be the target of jokes again, the nobody who avoided looks of contempt. "I'm not going back to that life," he shouted at the walls. Fear turned into fuel. He ran the numbers with surgical precision. He needed 14 hours of total focus to devour the material and reach the 600 points required to break into the top 10. The class leader, Hanang, sat at the top with 650, but Xiaomo now had a secret weapon. The night moved on, and the outside world went still, but his room was a volcano. At 8 in the evening, he ignored the dinner his mother offered. At 1 in the morning, even warnings about rest before the exam couldn't pull him out of his trance. When the lights went out at 3, he still didn't surrender to sleep. Under the covers, a flashlight beam lit the path to his transformation. Every page turned was a step away from failure. In the silence of the early morning, a mysterious figure materialized in the room, watching Xiaomo's sacrifice. The warning was clear. More than 1,000 candidates before him had failed miserably. Having power guaranteed nothing. The system bowed only to raw effort. Without sweat, the magic was useless. Driven by that ultimatum, the young man faced dawn without a wink of sleep, but with a mental clarity he had never felt before. The exhaustion was real, but his goal shone ahead like a beacon. At school, the atmosphere was tense. When he ran into Xiaoxi, he didn't hesitate. Asked about his preparation, he dropped the bomb. He would be among the top 10. His confidence was palpable, enough that the girl noticed a different spark in his eyes. Nearby, a classmate nearly choked on his tea, thinking Xiaomo had lost his mind. The boy just laughed, aware his words sounded arrogant, but Xiaoxi surprised everyone by saying she believed in his potential before they parted for the exam. The walk to his desk was surrounded by laughter and mockery. To everyone else, Xiaomo was just the class clown trying to act like a movie hero. He ignored the noise, put on his headphones, and let the world disappear. Inside, though, his blood boiled. His hand clenched into a tight fist, tapping lightly on the desk. The days of being humiliated were ending. Soon, everyone would swallow their own poison. When he received the test paper, the shock was immediate. His eyes scanned the questions and his heart raced. Not with fear, but with recognition. It was as if the pages he had devoured the night before were projected right there on the sheet. The formulas, the concepts, the answers, everything was there, exactly as he had memorized it. Disbelief hit him. The impossible was becoming real right under his nose. The shine in Xiaomo's eyes was no longer hope, it was certainty. In front of him, the exam was nothing more than a puzzle, whose pieces he already knew by heart. The initial goal of 600 points suddenly felt too modest. He sensed he could shatter the 650 mark. As his pen flew across the paper at a frantic speed, the teacher stopped beside him, suspicious. She hesitated, wondering if he was just scribbling nonsense to finish quickly. But when she glanced at his sheet, shock froze her in place. What she saw wasn't the work of a mediocre student, but the flawless execution of a genius. 4 days later, the classroom buzzed with mockery. Fat Wang led the laughter, ridiculing Xiaomo's promises and accusing him of being nothing more than a show-off seeking attention. Bullying was the only weapon those boys had to make up for the jealousy they felt over his closeness to Xiaoxi. Xiaomo, however, kept his fist clenched and remained completely silent. He didn't need to shout. The papers the teacher had just slammed onto the desk would do that for him. The teacher was furious. With a bitter speech about mediocrity and failure, he began reading the scores, humiliating those who thought they were safe. Liu opened the list with a pitiful result, and tension spread like smoke. As the names went on, the biggest surprise came. Hanan Yang, the eternal ruler of grades, had fallen to second place. A frantic murmur filled the room. If the best was second, who had committed the crime of stealing the throne? After a dramatic pause, the teacher delivered the verdict. Xiaomo, with an impressive 702 points. First place in the class. Second place in the school's overall ranking. The silence that followed was deafening. As he walked to the front of the classroom under the stunned stares of those who used to call him a clown, the background chatter died out. The average kid had just rewritten his own destiny in front of everyone. The teacher's lounge became a cauldron of disbelief. Xiaomo's leap from last place to the top was something academic logic couldn't swallow. Impossible! He cheated, one teacher shouted, unable to accept that an ordinary student could show such sharpness overnight. But the accusations hit a wall. Flipping through reference books, the teachers noticed that Xiaomo's answers were so sophisticated that even a quick lookup wouldn't explain them. This required mastery, not copying. There was only one conclusion. Either he was a sleeping genius or a legendary cheater. To end the debate, the principal delivered the final verdict, silencing the room as he slammed his folders onto the table. He wouldn't accept doubts. The order was blunt. Every teacher would prepare a completely new, original test for the next day. Xiaomo would be tested again, under absolute supervision, to prove his merit wasn't a trick. The next day, the boy enjoyed the quiet of recess, stretching and feeling sharper than ever. The material was tattooed into his brain. The system hadn't failed him. He savored a rare moment of peace, thinking the uproar had passed, until a teacher shattered his calm with an immediate summons. As he walked down the hallway toward the teacher's lounge, the poison of his classmates returned. "They got him," they whispered, certain the fraud would be exposed. Entering the room, Xiaomo kept his composure, greeting everyone with icy politeness that hid his anxiety. Without small talk, one teacher went straight to the point. There was no more room for discussion. This was a final reckoning with his own ability. The atmosphere in the lounge was heavy. Amid looks of disdain and a few of encouragement, the sentence was handed down. The test would be redone from scratch. A young teacher tried to soften the blow, saying it was just a chance to refine his knowledge, but Xiaomo wasn't naive. He knew what it meant. They thought he was a fraud. With an ironic smile, he sat down, ready to face the paper, confident that his brain was now a living encyclopedia. But the shock came fast. This wasn't the previous test. It was a set of brand new questions, far more complex and devious, designed specifically to block any kind of cheating or memorization. Cold sweat threatened to surface. If he froze now, the label of liar would be stamped on him forever. That's when, like a technological ghost, his invisible assistant appeared in the air, congratulating him on clearing the first stage and bringing that aura of power only the system provided. Watching his every move, the teacher thought Xiaomo's silence was pure fear. He had no idea the boy was negotiating his reward with an artificial intelligence. "I'm ready," Xiaomo declared to the empty air, leaving the teacher confused. Without wasting another second, he dove into the calculations and formulas. Time was his enemy, but his mind operated on another frequency. The transformation was frightening. Where there had once been a weak, hesitant student, there was now a problem-solving machine. In just 30 minutes, Xiaomo handed in the chemistry test with a victorious smile. Before the teachers could process the speed, another half-hour passed and the math paper landed on the table. The silence in the room was absolute. Doubt was being crushed by raw brilliance. Beside the desk, the teacher followed every stroke of the pen in tense silence. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a mix of awe and shock. She had no idea how that boy was operating. If perfection was already clear in chemistry, in math, the performance was humiliating for his critics. Xiaomo's solutions were so elegant and precise, they would make any veteran academic jealous. The teacher, visibly irritated at having underestimated him, regretted not creating even crueler problems. But the physics teacher, adjusting his glasses with an air of superiority, issued the final challenge. He assured his colleagues that his test was an impregnable fortress, filled with questions that would make even the school's geniuses cry. Xiaomo, hearing every word of that loud conspiracy, just smiled. To him, what the teachers called a nightmare, the system translated as child's play. Only 30 minutes later came the finishing blow. Xiaomo handed in the physics test as casually as someone turning in a rough draft. The teacher nearly fell out of his chair. He shouted in outrage, demanding to know how the boy had solved in half an hour what took him an entire night to create. The teachers' minds short-circuited. The time they needed to grade was the same time the student needed to dismantle the questions from scratch. Cornered by impossible logic, the physics teacher suggested that Xiaomo had always been a genius and had been pretending to be mediocre for some obscure reason. Asked what game he was playing, the boy replied with cutting honesty. To him, this was just a simple game. Losing control, one teacher grabbed him, shaking him while demanding to know if he had really solved the last problem on his own. With deadly innocence, Xiaomo shot back, "How could I cheat if the owners of the answers are all right here surrounding me?" Trapped by logic, the physics teacher had no choice but to admit defeat. Scratching his head, he confessed how much the turnaround broke his brain, but the teacher's pride won out. He had a rough diamond in front of him. "You're a genius, kid. It would be a crime not to put you in the physics Olympiad," he exclaimed. Practical as ever, Xiaomo asked only one thing. "Does that give extra points on college entrance exams?" When he heard yes, that it could secure him a spot at any elite university, the boy dropped the bomb. "I'm not interested." With no time for the teacher's egos, he simply nodded, excused himself, and turned his back. He needed to keep up the unshakable act. As he walked through the door under the stunned gazes of the teachers, who exchanged sparks without understanding how the impossible had happened, he felt the weight of victory. Walking through the hallways, he reflected on his bargain with the system. Hours earlier, when the assistant appeared, his reward had been unlocked: the instant comprehension skill. The effect was like an electric shock to the brain. What had once been a maze of formulas became a straight, obvious path. But he knew the easy part ended there. The system would demand its price. His thoughts were cut off by a familiar voice. Xiaoxi was there on the 6th floor, her face heavy with anxiety. She had heard about the ambush in the teacher's lounge and rushed over to understand what was happening. When she learned he had been forced to redo everything under suspicion of fraud, her silence was heavy. She looked at him deeply, trying to decipher who this new Xiaomo was, the one who, in the blink of an eye, stopped being an ordinary student and became the center of attention for the entire school. Xiaomo looked at the girl and went straight to the point. The teachers were hunting him because no one could swallow his lightning-fast rise. With a gaze full of doubt, he asked the fatal question, "And you? Do you believe me?" Without hesitation, Bella stepped closer and held his face between her hands. The gesture, filled with a tenderness that ignored the chaos around them, sealed her answer. She didn't care about rumors or the teacher's logic. She knew his character was unshakable. The progress might be a technological miracle, but his honesty was what kept her there. The romantic moment was broken by a whisper of hope. Overcoming her shyness, Bella confessed that if he kept up that insane pace, the dream of getting into the same university would stop being an illusion. To Xiaomo, those words were worth more than any perfect score. But the bubble burst when a noisy teacher walked out of the room, still furious about the boy's refusal to join the competitions. Trying to assert cheap moral authority, the teacher grabbed Xiaomo's shoulder and started lecturing him about inappropriate behavior. To him, seeing two teenagers close together in the hallway was an insult to academics. Xiaomo, no longer the submissive kid he once was, stood his ground. He demanded to know what was wrong with them being together and made it clear their relationship was serious. Snorting, the teacher pulled out the old argument that love destroys academic performance. That's when Xiaomo landed the masterstroke. "What's my current ranking?" he asked. "Second," the man growled. And Bella's? First. With a crooked smile, the boy pointed out the obvious. If they occupied the top spots in the school, how the hell was the relationship holding them back? The girl couldn't hold back her laughter, feeling protected by his boldness. Cornered by his own logic and feeling foolish, the teacher tried to change the subject, shouting that Xiaomo's spot in the competition still wasn't guaranteed. Calm as ice, Xiaomo delivered checkmate. The vice principal had already signed off on his results. Suggesting any irregularity now wasn't attacking a student, it was accusing the administration itself of fraud. The silence that followed was the music of his final victory. Mr. Luo lost control, yelling for Xiaomo to step away and clinging to the cheating theory. To him, refusing to compete was proof of fraud. That's when Bella stepped in with the poise of a queen. In a firm tone, she reminded him that a respected educator shouldn't slander talent. When she touched Xiaomo's shoulder, she wasn't just supporting him, she was challenging the teacher's blind authority. Sensing the moment, Xiaomo flipped the game. He faced Luo and proposed a deal. "Let's make a bet," he said. "If I lose, I'll do whatever you want. If I win, you buy fried chicken for the entire class." The teacher hesitated, calculating the cost of feeding 50 mouths, but fear of looking like a coward won out. He called the student crafty and shook his hand, sealing both their fates. The competition came and went under a heavy gray sky. On the bus ride back, the mood was one of expected defeat. The school had no tradition in physics, and even the team leaders seemed to have given up, sending a frustrated substitute teacher instead of the regular one. That teacher, stewing in career resentment and feeling dumped with a thankless task, had zero faith in those teenagers. To her, failure was only a matter of time. 5 days later, the verdict arrived. Xiaomo and Bella were summoned to the teacher's lounge, a place becoming far too familiar for him. The silence inside was thick. While they waited, Xiaomo whispered to his friend, curious about the exclusive call. Bella, sharp as ever, solved it instantly. The national competition results were finally out, and they were the only ones there because the outcome was about to shake the school. The principal began to speak, signaling it was time to face the truth. But the mood soured before the first announcement. The substitute teacher, Mrs. Lee, exploded in fury, attacking the two students. She couldn't stand seeing them together and snapped that their behavior was an insult to the rules. To her, walking hand in hand proved they thought they were above everyone else. What no one said out loud but everyone knew was that her frustration had nothing to do with morality. It came from an old grudge against their homeroom teacher. Tired of hiding the obvious, Xiaomo didn't back down. He faced the hostility and declared in front of everyone that they were together because they liked each other, period. The principal, trying to keep his composure while sipping tea, nearly choked when the boy dropped his final card. Xiaomo said with shameless confidence that the principal already knew everything and didn't oppose the relationship. The man spat out his drink, shocked by the audacity. Wiping his face and adjusting his glasses, he tried to deny ever giving such approval. But Xiaomo was relentless, reminding everyone of the agreement. If they brought home a prize from the physics competition, the relationship would be officially accepted without harassment. Mrs. Lee simmered with rage, feeling the boy was turning the room against her, but the situation slipped out of her control when another teacher stepped forward. To everyone's surprise, this new ally confirmed the story. He looked at the principal and asked pointedly if he had really forgotten that deal. Trapped between his promise and his colleague's pressure, the principal held his head, realizing there was no escaping the monster he had helped create. Cornered by his own words, the principal finally gave in. He admitted the deal existed, and that the school wouldn't be foolish enough to block a talent like Xiaomo's. For him, the matter was settled. Positive results were what mattered, and the discussion should end there. But Mrs. Lee, fueled by resentment, tried one last attack, claiming she was being persecuted. Losing patience, the principal shut it down immediately, ordering her to control herself because the main announcement could no longer wait. The announcement hit like an earthquake. The school didn't just win, it dominated. Xiaomo took first place nationwide, with Xiaosai right behind in second. The auditorium erupted in applause. The teachers, once suspicious, now radiated pride at seeing the institution at the top of the rankings. Only Mrs. Lee remained drowning in bitterness, unable to accept that the worst student had become the king of the competition. In her twisted mind, it was all a conspiracy to benefit her rival and leave her in the shadows. As everyone cleared out, Mr. Luo approached the couple in the hallway. To Xiaomo's surprise, the teacher wore a wide grin. The executioner's mask fell away, replaced by respect. He got straight to the point. The bet stood. He would happily pay for the fried chicken feast for the whole class, celebrating the impossible victory. Trying to be modest, Xiaomo said the bet had just been a spur-of-the-moment joke, but the teacher refused to back down. Luo insisted that a man honors his word and that noon would be reward time. The ordinary boy didn't just win the girl in the top rank, he turned his harshest critics into allies. Mr. Luo wasn't just a man of bets, he proved to be a true mentor. Hugging Xiaomo with genuine pride, he made it clear that his earlier harshness was just a facade to polish talent. The young man finally understood the school's inner workings. Deep down, teachers aren't villains. They're persistent and sometimes stubborn, but their ultimate goal is always the success of those sitting in the desks. The old tension gave way to mutual respect, changing the air in the hallway. Meanwhile, in another classroom, Xiaomo's legend was already taking on a life of its own. The teacher used his name like a banner, demanding from the class the same dedication as someone who, in just 1 month, had gone from obscurity to the top of the podium. Even the grumpy Mrs. Li, between one rant and another about her own past glories, had to admit it. Xiaomo was now the standard to follow. The students, already exhausted from hearing his name repeated like a mantra, joked that he had become the teacher's favorite, even among those who had never met him in person. But away from the spotlight and the praise, Xiaomo was dealing with something far deeper. The virtual assistant reappeared to confirm the obvious. Mission completed with distinction. The reward, the lightning comprehension skill. What had once been a Herculean effort to decode formulas now flowed as easily as reading a comic book. Answers surfaced in his mind naturally, without hesitation. The boy who used to leave school hunched over and in a hurry, running from his own limitations, was gone. In his place stood a fearless young man. Insecurity had been replaced by a cold, powerful calm. With the system at his side and his mind operating at superhuman levels, Xiaomo realized there was no longer any task, test, or challenge that could stop him. He was no longer just a student. He was the one running the game. The farewell mood was broken by an urgent call. As Xiaomo was about to leave, a classmate stopped him with an anxious question. He reminded the hero that the showdown against the freshman class was about to start. Without the team's star, defeat was guaranteed. Lost in books and systems, Xiaomo had almost set basketball aside, but his competitive spirit spoke louder. With a confident grin, he assured Wang, "Relax, we're going in to crush them." On the court, the atmosphere was heavy. The freshman team radiated toxic arrogance, firing off insults and treating victory as a sure thing. They saw themselves as invincible and openly underestimated the seniors. Xiaomo didn't bother trash-talking. For him, the court was a place for action, not gossip. The challenge was set. The first team to score 50 points would claim glory. The deal was sealed, and the ball went up. The opening was a punch to the gut. The opponents played with savage aggression, as if it were a war, not a school game. In just a few plays, the score opened at 2-0 for the freshmen. Their leader celebrated mockingly, while Xiaomo's teammates felt the pressure weigh down on them. It was clear the rivals were willing to do anything to humiliate them. What they didn't know was that Xiaomo's brain now processed movements, trajectories, and tactics at superhuman speed. The freshman's fury was about to collide with the surgical precision of a genius who no longer knew how to lose. Huang snapped an irritated question, annoyed by Xiaomo's passivity as he watched the game as if in a trance. Feeling victorious, one opponent even told his teammates they didn't need to try anymore. They had no idea that the hero's silence was the sound of the system processing every variable. Watching Sang Dewei dribble, Xiaomo felt the same spark he felt when solving complex equations. He wasn't just watching, he was decoding. Lightning comprehension proved to be a versatile weapon. In seconds, Xiaomo absorbed the opponent's dribbling technique, identified its flaws, and rebuilt it in his mind into a perfected, unstoppable version. He could hardly believe it. The system wasn't just academic, it was turning him into an elite athlete in real time. Every detail, from wrist angle to weight distribution, was analyzed and mastered. Sang Dewei was still basking in his arrogance when Xiaomo exploded into motion. With eye-defying speed, he crossed the court. In a blink, the ball vanished from the opponent's hands. Xiaomo now dribbled with artistic perfection, leaving defenders behind like statues of salt. The shot came with power and precision that silenced the crowd. The shock was universal. Spectators murmured in disbelief, realizing the boy hadn't just copied the opponent's style, he had elevated it to an unreachable level. The freshman leader, stunned by the humiliating steal, demanded answers but received only a cold warning. The game was just beginning. Inside, Xiaomo smiled. For his rivals, the nightmare had only started, but for him, victory had been written before the next basket. Xiaomo wasn't just playing, he was orchestrating a technical massacre. Alone, he put 42 points on the board, and the pace only slowed because he sensed the opponents were already broken, suffocating under pressure they had never felt before. Soon, boredom crept in. He had hoped for resistance, a fierce counterattack to make his blood boil, but instead saw a freshman team resigned to its fate. To test his limits and fully validate the system's power, he stopped, felt the wind, and calculated an impossible trajectory. If the skill worked on complex formulas, the physics of basketball would be his new playground. The court fell silent when he stopped 3 steps behind the three-point line. The defender shouted in disbelief, trying to understand what that crazy guy was about to attempt from such an absurd distance. Xiaomo didn't hesitate. He launched the shot. To those watching, time seemed to slow, the ball slicing through the air in a perfect arc that defied logic. When the net snapped with the clean sound of a swish, the crowd was stunned. The calculation had been millimeter perfect. Walking off the court with a crushing 50-0 victory, Xiaomo didn't miss the chance to deliver a lesson. In a cold tone, he told the freshmen to go back to their books and basic drills, questioning whether playing against them was anything but a total waste of time. Sang Dawei, the opposing leader, was in pieces. The humiliation ran so deep, it felt as if his passion for the sport had been ripped away by a single senior. Meanwhile, along the court fences, the buzz grew. Other students watched in awe, calling Xiaomo the god of basketball. No one there had ever seen someone so dominant. Even players from other teams like San lost the will to step onto the court after witnessing the massacre. Xiaomo's name now spread through the school like wildfire, no longer just the academic example cited by Mrs. Lee, but an urban legend who crushed opponents in any arena he chose. On the way back, as Xiaomo said goodbye to Wang and headed off, the atmosphere shifted abruptly. Something unexpected was about to cross his path. The calm after the game was shattered by a ball whistling through the air, thrown by a complete stranger. The man fixed Xiaomo with a sharp gaze, asking if he really was the phenomenon everyone was talking about. Without beating around the bush, he said he was looking for someone unafraid of risk. Xiaomo stayed on guard and demanded to know who the intruder was and what he wanted. Acting as a mediator, Sang introduced the newcomer, Chao Yuno, the legendary defender from their elementary school days. The intent was clear, a shooting competition right now with no time to rest. Eager to leave, Xiaomo tossed the ball back with a dismissive air that caught his opponents off guard. But the provocation escalated when Yuno struck at the deepest wound, his relationship with Xiaoxi. He mocked the couple, implying that the most beautiful girl in school must have something wrong with her eyesight to be dating a weakling like him. Xiaomo's silence was threatening. He turned his back, seeming to ignore the insult, but stopped abruptly. When he turned around, the calm on his face was the prelude to a storm. The court quickly filled with onlookers, sensing that the god of basketball was about to be truly tested. "What do you want out of this?" the hero asked. Yuno's answer dripped with venom. If Xiaomo lost, he would be banned from the court, and worse, forced to break up with Xiaoxi. Without hesitation, the hero began to warm up. He suggested a quick match, first to 10 points, not wanting to waste his time. Then he fired back. If he won, Yuno would have to call him Big Brother. Confident in his record as a provincial scorer, the rival scoffed at the bet and demanded that the kid first prove he could even make a shot. While Yuno's fans praised his style and fame, Xiaomo locked his eyes on the rim. He wasn't there to play. He was there to crush the arrogance of someone who dared to insult the woman he loved. Xiaomo had no time to waste. The tension peaked when Chao Yuno, the arrogant scorer, finished his shooting run. The result was impressive, 9 makes out of 10. To Yuno's followers, the game was already over. With a contemptuous smile, he tossed the ball to the hero, suggesting he give up to avoid public humiliation in front of the entire school. But Xiaomo's calm was on another level. He held the ball, feeling its weight and calculating every variable invisible to ordinary eyes. The desire to put that detractor in his place fueled his focus. When he finally shot, the ball left his hands with such a bizarre spin that the crowd murmured, thinking he had badly missed. Physics, however, was on his side. The ball dropped cleanly through the net and rolled straight back to his feet. The silent massacre began. Without running or wearing himself down like his opponent, Xiaomo stayed still, like a sniper. 5 perfect shots. 7. 9. The crowd, which had once worshipped the provincial god, now stared in stunned silence at a display of absolute dominance. While Yuno sweated and panicked, Xiaomo operated with machine-like precision. The title of God of Basketball changed hands right there, amid the students' euphoric cheers. The hero, however, was not seduced by sudden fame. At the 10th and decisive shot, his attention was drawn to Coach Sun, watching from afar. In that moment, basketball was just a stepping stone. His eyes were fixed on the future and the promise he had made to Xiaoxi. Nothing, not even sports, would distract him from earning a university spot alongside the woman he loved. Xiaomo's priority was crystal clear. He only wanted to secure his place beside Xiaoxi without being dragged into the exhausting cycle of competitions his newfound genius attracted. On the 10th shot, something strange happened. The ball missed, to everyone's surprise. With feigned innocence, he approached his opponent and declared a draw, ending the contest diplomatically. The moment was cut short by the coach's voice, announcing that the vice principal urgently wanted to see him. Xiaomo said his goodbyes and left, feeling relieved. In his mind, the plan had been perfect. Miss on purpose to avoid Coach Sun's spotlight. Back on the court, Dawei celebrated his friend's miss, but Sahayun, with sharper eyes, saw through the move. He noticed the miss was calculated to the millimeter, right after the boy spotted the coach. Xiaomo chose to preserve his opponent's pride and his own peace. That false defeat turned Shajun's mockery into deep respect for the young man's intelligence and courage. Walking through the silent halls after classes, Xiaomo found the late summons strange. When he opened the office door, he found the vice principal and a selected group waiting. The meeting had a serious purpose. The school was forming an elite squad of top students for intensive postgraduate prep classes. The goal was to prevent in-house talent from stumbling on the entrance exam, a common mistake in previous years. The disappointment of losing his free time quickly gave way to an inner smile. Among the selected was Xiaoxi, who greeted him with sparkling eyes. With her by his side, the extra study hours would no longer be a burden. As other students whispered about the fame of Mr. Shank, a legendary teacher who had already sent 3 students to the country's top universities, a mood of total focus set in. The master went straight to the point. Exam failure came from one fatal mistake, spending too much time on a single question. Training for perfection was just beginning. Mr. Sang was surgical in his analysis. The entrance exam wasn't just about knowing the material, but about not being swallowed by time. He explained that many geniuses failed for 2 simple reasons: wasting hours on a single question or misreading the prompt and throwing all their effort away. At the back of the room, murmurs spread as some students feared the so-called bone crusher questions, traps designed to lock up their thinking. Xiaomo, already operating on another level thanks to the system, didn't want to spend his afternoons locked in that room. He looked at the professor and issued a bold challenge. If he proved those tasks were trivial and achieved a perfect score in record time, would he be allowed to skip the extra classes? The room was stunned. Arrogant, some whispered, recalling that even the vice principal admitted the problems were difficult. That's when Xiaoxi stood up. With a smile from someone who knew the power her boyfriend hid, she silenced the critics. She reminded everyone that Xiaomo wasn't just a lucky student, but the national physics champion. She guaranteed he would crush those tests in the blink of an eye. A boy with glasses tried to downplay it, saying Xiaoxi's brilliance was proven, but Xiaomo's was suspicious. She didn't back down and confronted him directly, asking if he was calling Xiaomo a liar. Mr. Sang stepped in before things escalated. He revealed that he had personally reviewed Xiaomo's makeup exam and was impressed by the boy's surgical precision. Instead of punishing the audacity, he asked Xiaomo to share his secret with the group. Slightly confused, Xiaomo asked what he would gain from that. With a knowing look, the teacher reminded him that he and the principal were the only ones who had approved the couple's relationship. Gratitude left no room for argument. Xiaomo sighed and agreed. He would show everyone how to turn an academic monster into a child's game. Scratching the back of his neck with his usual laid-back manner, the boy decided to be honest. Without sugarcoating it, he explained that the secret wasn't just raw intelligence, but brute strategy, treating the brain like high-performance software. If you already have the solution patterns loaded before you even read the question, the hard work is already done, he said. He compared the method to a data preloading process. Those who memorize problem structures gain an overwhelming head start. To illustrate, he mentioned the dreaded genetics problems. These are questions that drain anyone's time and energy, but Xiaomo was firm. If you master the formulas in advance and anticipate the scenarios, what once felt like a maze turns into a straight line. Although some students were intimidated by the sheer amount of information required to memorize, he made it clear that everyone should find their own pace, but that efficiency lives in preparation. Professor Chang was mesmerized by the logic. He pointed out that this technique turned 30 seconds of agony into just 3 seconds of mechanical execution. It's like chess, the teacher compared. Every move is calculated for checkmate before the first piece is even moved. Between looks of doubt and admiration, the class realized that the impossible was becoming reality for anyone willing to push beyond their limits. A month later, the result hit like a hammer. Xiaomo claimed first place overall in the mock exam, leaving the rest of the school far behind. The teacher, beaming, congratulated him on the historic achievement, but the young man merely smiled and said that finishing the test 10 minutes early was what truly gave him confidence. While his classmates celebrated finally understanding how to handle complex questions, Xiaomo kept a modest face. Inside, however, he knew the harsh truth. Without the support of his system, the path for others would still be a steep and lonely climb. The celebratory mood at the top of the rankings didn't last long. As soon as the others drifted away, Bella approached him with a heavy look and a silence that spoke volumes. Sensing the tension, Xiaomo blurted out, "Are you mad because I passed you in the rankings?" She smiled, but the light in her eyes was sad. She said she was proud of his progress, but Xiaomo didn't buy it. He smelled a secret in the air. With the authority of someone who wouldn't accept half-truths, he demanded the real answer. "I'm your boyfriend. If you care about me, say it." The moment was cut short by Mr. Shang's dry cough as he dismissed the class for the day. While the room emptied and a class clown winked at Xiaomo, suggesting he lock the doors, the couple was finally left alone in the empty hallway. The silence was suffocating. Xiaomo pressed again, and then the blow landed. With a trembling voice, Bella confessed that their plan to study together was falling apart. Her mother, without warning, had decided her future lay overseas. Xiaomo's efforts to level up now felt meaningless in the face of an ocean of distance. Determined not to let others write his fate, Xiaomo acted. The very next day, he was sitting in Bella's family's luxurious living room, facing her mother. He knew every word carried the weight of gold or lead. He tried to be diplomatic, calling her aunt, carefully testing the waters. To his surprise, the hostess wasn't the authoritarian monster he had imagined. She said she wasn't against young people getting to know each other and trusted her daughter's judgment, but freedom came with a price and a condition. Looking him straight in the eyes, Bella's mother made it clear that while she didn't forbid the relationship, there was one non-negotiable priority. Before any talk of eternal love or local college plans, her daughter had to meet a requirement that could change everything. The power game was on the table, and Xiaomo realized that to keep Bella close, he would have to face a system far more complex than his virtual assistant, the iron will of a mother planning her child's future. Bella's mother was ruthless. To her, her daughter's future was a sacred project, and everything else was noise. She made it clear that the final decision was hers, questioning whether the boy truly understood the weight of an elite education. For a moment, Xiaomo almost laughed. He carried in his mind a system that could humiliate any university on the planet, but that secret would die with him. If he spoke, he'd be labeled crazy or a liar. When Bella tried to intervene, her mother silenced her with a glance. The stage belonged to Xiaomo. As the pressure mounted, the system triggered an alert. Anticipation skill activated. Filled with sudden clarity, he asked his girlfriend to step aside. He wasn't going to beg for mercy. He would face this woman as an equal, like an adult who knew how to command the board. He began by questioning the idea of a good education. Was it just a golden diploma or a modern building? Standing tall with a confidence that radiated power, Xiaomo argued that the true foundation of knowledge lay in great teachers and the ability to build a solid career at home. He insisted that the country had brilliant minds and that going abroad wasn't always the answer. The hostess applauded, impressed by his rhetoric, but she still held a trump card he seemed to be ignoring. That was when the connections card came into play. Her tone turned surgical. Education wasn't just about books, it was about networking. Real power lay in people and in the connections forged at internationally renowned universities, ties that would ease Bella's entry into the top tier of the adult world. The system warned Xiaomo the opponent was landing critical hits on his strategy. He realized that to win this battle and keep the love of his life close, he would have to prove that his own connections and his own worth were more valuable than any foreign elite. A red alert flashed in the system. The harsh reality card was on the table. It was a devastating move from Bella's mother, designed to crush romantic arguments with the weight of status and power. Xiaomo felt the impact but didn't retreat. He knew connections were tools for ordinary people, for those who relied on favors between classes. Contacts are crutches for those who need them, he thought. With audacity bordering on insolence, he declared that neither he nor Bella needed that kind of network to succeed. The hostess froze. Usually, those beneath her social standing barely dared to breathe in her presence. Yet here was a high school boy challenging her convictions with blind confidence. For a brief moment, the ice cracked. She admitted that Xiaomo reminded her of her own combative youth. Bella, shocked, whispered that she had never seen her mother lower her guard like that. Xiaomo thought he had won through sheer endurance, but the game still had one final round. Realizing that words alone wouldn't change Bella's fate, Xiaomo decided to wager his very soul. He stood up and, with a voice that cut through the silence, proposed a contract. Confused, the woman reminded him that he was still just a student and shouldn't let rebellion ruin his academic future. But Xiaomo's plan was far more insane. He wanted to bet on the entrance exam itself. "If I score a perfect absolute score, you let Bella stay in China," he challenged. Her mother nearly lost her breath. "Do you have any idea what you're saying? No one has ever scored 750 points in the history of this exam," she shot back. Xiaomo didn't blink. He admitted that the summit was unreachable for ordinary humans, then delivered the line that sealed their fate. "If I can't achieve the impossible, how can I be worthy of standing beside your daughter?" She closed her eyes, torn between admiration for the boy's courage and the certainty that he had lost his mind. The bet was sealed, but the price was extremely high. Bella's mother accepted the challenge with an icy stare, making it clear that if he failed, it would prove he was nothing more than a selfish, unworthy boy. The atmosphere in the room grew so heavy that even Bella seemed to suffocate under the weight of her emotions. Without allowing any rebuttal, the matriarch ended the discussion with an authoritative shout, ordering her daughter to escort the young man out. She was exhausted by his audacity. In the hallway, the silence was crushing. Xiaomo avoided Bella's gaze, feeling the weight of his own arrogance settle in. He tried to reassure her, promising he would bend her mother's will, but inside he was boiling with anger. The reason for all that pressure was simple. The system had given him no choice. He had received a mandatory mission: win the bet or face public humiliation and total failure. The next day, during evening classes, skepticism spread through the room. Seeing Xiaomo reading newspapers instead of study guides, Wang questioned whether he had grown overconfident after ranking first in the mock exam. Xiaomo snapped back, explaining that to achieve perfection, the impossible 750 points, he had to master every detail of the world, including essay topics hidden within the news. Alone with his thoughts, he summoned the virtual assistant. The exchange was tense. Xiaomo vented his frustration, calling the tasks stupid. The system's blonde assistant didn't let it slide, demanding respect and reminding him that SWEB never assigns impossible missions. That was when it finally clicked. A perfect score wasn't a delusion. It was a real possibility calculated by the machine. Before disappearing, she added a motivational jab, reminding him that due to his overwhelming basketball victory, he still had a pending reward to claim. Xiaomo expected an explosive ability, something that would turn his brain into a quantum supercomputer. Instead, the system named him Calligraphy Master. At first, he thought it was a mistake. How could beautiful handwriting help him reach the impossible 750 points? But as he reflected in class, the answer became clear. The essay section was the only battlefield where cold formulas weren't enough. To earn a perfect score, he needed flawless aesthetics and writing that struck the evaluators' souls. His handwriting would be his signature as a genius. While Huang celebrated the end of classes and invited him to play, Xiaomo was on a completely different wavelength. His focus was absolute. The next step, however, wasn't in books but in his heart, taking Bella to meet his mother. In the courtyard, he found her trembling with anxiety. He tried to calm her down, joking that the interrogation he endured at her aunt's mansion had been far worse. "My mom is easygoing. Relax," he assured her, even though he knew deep down that this meeting was a decisive turning point. When they arrived, the reception was a whirlwind of hospitality. Xiaomo's mother opened the door with a radiant smile and froze for a second when she saw Bella's beauty. Before her son could finish the introductions, she had already kidnapped the guest by the hand, pulling her inside while showering her with praise and marveling at how lucky Xiaomo was. He could only watch, scratching his head, stunned by his mother's unprecedented enthusiasm. Lunch unfolded in rare harmony. The tension that had haunted the couple for days seemed to evaporate amid laughter and homemade dishes. For a few hours, the entrance exam and plans to study abroad faded into the background. At goodbye, his mother's affection made it clear that Bella was already family. Support at home was secured. Now all that remained was for Xiaomo to use his newfound mastery of the pen to turn paper into a passport for their future. The night ended with a lightness Xiaomo hadn't felt in a long time. As he walked Bella to the car, he joked about how warm his mother's reception had been compared to her mother's icy coldness. Bella, still shy, didn't immediately grasp the depth of his promise. But Xiaomo was resolute. He wouldn't just pass, he would dominate. His confidence wasn't wishful thinking, it was a mathematical certainty fueled by a system that didn't know failure. Months flew by in the blink of an eye, and Judgment Day arrived. The school courtyard was packed with anxious parents, turning the entrance exam into an event of epic proportions. Amid the chaos, a blonde blogger named Sao Yu was live streaming, capturing the tension in the air. Suddenly, the camera focused on Xiaomo and Bella, calmly walking out of the building while the timer still showed 1 hour remaining. Sao Yu was stunned. "You're already done? There's still so much time left," she exclaimed, pointing at her phone as viewers flooded the stream with questions. With a calm that bordered on arrogance, Xiaomo explained that the job was done. Not only had he finished early, he admitted on camera, without hesitation, that the questions were easy and that his goal was nothing less than a perfect score in every subject. The internet showed no mercy. Within seconds, the comment section exploded with hatred. They called him a clown, arrogant, and a liar, claiming that no one, absolutely no one, finishes a foreign language and general knowledge exam in record time with perfect accuracy. Visibly uncomfortable with the teenager's audacity, Sao Yu chose to end the interview before the virtual lynching escalated. Little did they know that while the world called him insane, Xiaomo was already envisioning the 750 points etched into his destiny. The blogger walked away shaking her head, convinced she had just interviewed a lunatic. Online, the atmosphere turned vicious. Comments demanded she focus on Bella and stop giving attention to the comedian. The damage didn't stop at social media. Local newspapers took the bait and published scathing articles about the arrogance of Lingai's youth. The controversy grew so intense that the school principal sat in his office, reading the headlines with a deeply troubled expression. When Xiaomo entered the room, the principal wasted no time. He handed the newspaper to the boy, pointing at words like pretentious and arrogant, now tied to the school's reputation. He feared that online persecution would destroy his most talented student's future before the results were even released. "How are we supposed to clear the school's name after this?" he asked anxiously. Xiaomo didn't hesitate. He met his mentor's gaze and said firmly, "I didn't lie. The school will be fine because I'll deliver what I promised." While chaos reigned outside, the silence of the grading room was broken by a shocked gasp. One evaluator stopped in front of an exam, mesmerized. The handwriting was otherworldly, a work of art that seemed to follow the strictest rules of aesthetic perfection. But the greatest shock came when he checked the answers. 0 mistakes. Thinking he was hallucinating, he called over the senior examiner. The older man, initially skeptical, assumed his subordinate was simply impressed by neat handwriting. But as he began reading the essay, the world around him faded away. He was left speechless, trapped by the flawless structure and depth of the sentences leaping off the page. This wasn't just a school essay, it was a manifesto of genius. While the internet mocked him as a clown, Xiaomo's magnificent work was about to shatter the bubble of the nation's education system. The graders were in shock. The senior examiner, with decades of experience, admitted he had never seen anything like it. The essay wasn't just grammatically flawless, it was a philosophical masterpiece overflowing with ambition. To the supervisor, there was no debate. It deserved a perfect score without question. As the rest of Xiaomo's exam was reviewed, it revealed a surgical, error-free performance. The verdict was unanimous. There was nothing to criticize, only to admire. Behind the scenes at the grading center, rumors spread like wildfire. One staff member whispered to a colleague about the explosive news that a student had achieved the absolute maximum score. The woman, skeptical and arrogant, dismissed it as impossible, claiming the data was confidential. But the buzz was unstoppable. Within days, the entire country would know the truth behind that legendary number. While the internet boiled with theories, Xiaomo and Bella were alone at the aunt's mansion. The atmosphere was pure anxiety. Phone in hand and heart racing, Xiaomo announced that the results had finally been released. Bella closed her eyes, terrified and hopeful at the same time, as he tapped the screen. His shout echoed through the room. "It's me!" Confirmation that the impossible had become reality. The celebration was cut short by Bella's mother arriving abruptly. She walked in commenting on strange news she had heard that morning and was surprised to see Xiaomo there so early. Glowing with excitement, Bella couldn't hold back and blurted out that the results were out. Maintaining her firm posture, the matriarch looked straight at Xiaomo and asked if he had something important to say. With absolute calm, phone held out, he prepared to reveal the score that would change both their destinies forever. Xiaomo couldn't contain himself and shouted his victory. The impossible was done. Yet the aunt's reaction was strangely restrained. With an analytical gaze, she revealed that the morning paper had already hinted at the existence of a student with a perfect score. Xiaomo felt a bitter taste in his mouth. Once again, the media had twisted facts or released incomplete information for engagement. He hated being used as cannon fodder for journalists, but the official result in his hand was undeniable. Sensing the moment, Bella went straight to the point. "So what now, Mom? Is the plan to send me abroad over?" To the couple's surprise and relief, the woman smiled. She admitted she wouldn't force the trip if her daughter wanted to stay, but she emphasized one crucial point: the perfect score, as phenomenal as it was, wasn't what convinced her. What truly earned her respect was Xiaomo's steel-like courage, his relentless determination, and the fact that he was a man who backed every word with real results. Placing a hand on his shoulder, she solemnly declared that from that moment on, he had her full trust. Xiaomo felt the weight of the world lift off his back. Bella beamed, celebrating the fact that they had defied logic and won. Her joy was so great that she was already imagining calling the woman something far more familiar than aunt in the near future. The impossible had been achieved. Still, the future mother-in-law had one last card to play, a blunt condition that made both of them flush instantly. With unshakable authority, she demanded a promise: no grandchildren until both of them had their university diplomas in hand. "It's strictly forbidden," she reinforced, determined to keep youthful excitement from skipping crucial stages of life. Xiaomo and Bella froze in embarrassment, trying to process her brutal honesty. The path to university was clear, but academic commitment was now the only allowed priority. She wasn't joking. Her stare was an ultimatum. Before the tension could worsen, Xiaomo stepped up and sealed the commitment. He assured her that their education came first, and that he would never neglect the responsibilities of a planned future. The matriarch finally relaxed, admitting that if he could dominate the entrance exam perfectly, he had the discipline to honor his word. The moment of peace was interrupted by a phone vibrating insistently. It was Xiaomo's mother, her voice trembling as if her heart were in her throat. She could barely speak, revealing that the prestigious Kua University was already bombarding the house with calls. "I made it, Mom. I'm #1, he said firmly. Her sobs broke through the line. She remembered the sleepless nights, the bedroom light glowing until dawn, and the fear of watching her son push himself so hard. To her, seeing his name at the top wasn't luck. It was the result of sacrifice few would ever understand. 2 days later, as things finally settled, the couple decided it was time to breathe. When Xiaomo met Bella, he was left speechless. She radiated a beauty that seemed to celebrate their newfound freedom. He treated her with protective care, as if she were his most precious treasure. Tapping the bike seat, he invited her for a classic ride, cutting through the wind along the city streets. The world finally felt right. Between laughter and playful teasing, Xiaomo joked about her enjoying a free ride, earning a fond idiot in return that made him grin from ear to ear. When they stopped at the park, memories flooded his mind. Months ago, he was a joke, the kid no one took seriously, the class failure. Now, the park's silence was the soundtrack of his victory. He was no longer that insecure boy. The scars from sleepless nights and past humiliation had become the fuel that turned him into a living legend. The ghost of doubt had finally been exorcised. As they rode, Xiaoxi touched on the key issue, their future. Xiaomo didn't hesitate. He confirmed he would attend the same university as her, with his mother's full support. Her relief was visible, a peaceful moment where even nature seemed to conspire in their favor. But the calm shattered when they spotted massive banners hanging from the school buildings. Xiaomo's name shone in bold letters as the best of the best, the owner of a perfect score. Before he could process the tribute, a firm hand landed on his shoulder. It was the principal, followed by a wave of teachers and students who erupted into thunderous applause. "You've done something historic for Linhai," the man declared. Xiaomo tried to downplay it, but the school wouldn't accept anything less than an epic celebration. The principal announced the unthinkable. Xiaomo would be immortalized with the institution's highest honor. Shock rippled through the crowd. In 4 decades of history, only 4 names had received that privilege. They were legends, literary titans, internet empire builders, influential politicians, and world-renowned scientists. And now, standing among those giants, was an 18-year-old who until yesterday had been considered ordinary. The gap between his age and the weight of that honor left many breathless. How could someone so young stand alongside figures who shaped the nation? Some still doubted it. One teacher questioned whether the reward was excessive for a mere student. But the principal responded with a lesson in strategic vision. The Wall of Honor wasn't just decoration, it was the ultimate symbol of prestige and the fuel meant to inspire generations to come. For years, that wall had been seen as a forbidden fruit, something unattainable for anyone who wasn't a born genius or a cradle prodigy. Xiaomo shattered that barrier, proving that effort, and perhaps a well-guarded secret, could lift a complete nobody to the peak of the academic Olympus. The teacher fell silent. The principal's logic was checkmate. If a phenomenon like Xiaomo didn't belong on that wall, then no one else had the right to be there. With the decision sealed, the courtyard erupted into an ovation that seemed endless. The young man, however, felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. Scratching his head with his usual modesty, he tried to refuse, saying he wasn't worthy and couldn't accept it. That was when the principal stepped closer and spoke frankly into his ear. Xiaomo's prestige wasn't just symbolic, it was profitable. Thanks to his performance, the government would immediately release 20,000 yen to the school, and that amount would jump to 50,000 once his name was immortalized on the wall. Xiaomo froze. He was no longer just a student, he had become the institution's financial engine. Realizing the importance of his role, he straightened his posture and accepted the burden, saying that if he was to serve as an example, he would take it on. The principal smiled, but the payment for such an honor would come in the form of exposure. He warned Xiaomo to prepare himself. The national media was starving for an interview with the absolute entrance exam record holder. And it wouldn't be a simple recorded segment, it would be a live broadcast to millions. The greatest student in history would have to face the cameras and defend Lin High School before the entire country. Moments later, in the conference room, everything was set. Under the studio lights and the principal's watchful eye, the journalist fired the question everyone wanted answered. What message did he have for young people who dreamed of following in his footsteps? Silence filled the room. As Xiaomo processed the question, he couldn't stop thinking about the massive funding his pen had secured. Now, the world was waiting for the words of a genius who had risen from absolute nothing to the top of Olympus. Xiaomo looked straight into the camera lenses with brutal clarity. He knew no one there had a system running in their brain, but he also understood that the machine was only half the glory. Without iron discipline to complete every mandatory mission, he would still be a nobody. With a smile from someone who had cracked the code of life, he delivered the line that stunned the nation. Don't be afraid to smash your face into the ground. The audience and viewers froze, struggling to process the rawness of the advice. Xiaomo continued, explaining that fear is the true jailer. Fear of being mocked, fear of looking into the eyes of the one you love, fear of failing at the decisive moment and blaming fate. Determination isn't a gift, he said. It's a habit. Take risks while you're young. Don't be afraid of disappointing others. Be afraid of never trying to be great. He finished feeling the weight of those sincere words, far from any cliché script. The response was immediate. The system chimed frantically, notifying him that the public's affection and admiration had generated a massive reward, 10,000 experience points and the right to a special draw. The invisible assistant, in her usual teasing tone, warned him that he would only get one chance. Without hesitation, Xiaomo approved it. He felt unstoppable, riding an overwhelming wave of luck. The data spun across the holographic interface and stopped on a golden result. "Congratulations!" the system's blonde assistant exclaimed. "You've unlocked the skill brilliant idea." Xiaomo waited for a technical explanation, but she only smirked, keeping the mystery intact. A chill ran down his spine. He knew that coming from Sweb, this new tool wouldn't just be useful. It would be something capable of flipping the world upside down when he needed it most. The system explained that humanity's greatest discoveries, from the benzene ring to perfect geometries, were born from a flash, a brilliant idea. Xiaomo didn't wait. Blood boiling, he activated the new skill and dove into the 5 greatest unsolved problems of modern mathematics. The moment the system gave the green light, his brain turned into a particle accelerator. He grabbed a pen and unleashed calculations onto paper at superhuman speed, oblivious to the world, piling up formulas that would challenge any doctorate. He only stopped when his body cried for mercy, and a knock at the door broke his trance. It was 5 in the afternoon. Xiaomo tried to spare his mother from answering, but she insisted he focus on his studies. When she opened the door, she was stunned. A commanding man introduced himself as Mr. Lee, none other than the chairman of admissions for the prestigious Anna University. He didn't send an email. He crossed the city to secure a special student. As his mother struggled to process the visit, more knocking followed. Another heavyweight appeared, this time representing Taikoku University. The atmosphere in the living room instantly grew heavy. The two representatives stared each other down like gladiators in an arena, ready to fight tooth and nail for the record holder. The bidding began. Full scholarships, top-tier housing, and king-level living conditions were thrown onto the table to sway the family. While Taikoku's envoy tried to convince Xiaomo's mother, Mr. Li, with the keen eye of someone who recognizes gold, noticed the scattered sheets of paper on Xiaomo's bedroom floor. He bent down and picked up one draft. What he saw weren't simple school exercises, but the scribbles of a mind that had just used a brilliant idea to touch the impossible. The recruitment game was about to shift levels. They weren't chasing a straight-A student anymore. They were facing a genius who could redefine science. The living room turned into a high-stakes auction. Desperate, Taikoku's envoy slammed a 300,000 yuan offer onto the table, pushing documents for Xiaomo's mother to sign immediately. But Mr. Li dropped the hammer. 5 million yuan in scholarships. The rival nearly fell out of his chair. That was impossible, he shouted. Not even renowned professors earned that much. Li didn't budge an inch. He looked at Xiaomo and gave him full authority. Ask for anything. If you join my university, the sky is the limit. The tension was suffocating. Taikoku's representative tried to discredit the offer, claiming no institution could sustain such a figure and that it was all a bluff. But Li knew Xiaomo was a once-in-a-lifetime investment. Keeping his composure, the young man laid down his final condition. He and Bella would go together. Without hesitation, Li doubled down, guaranteed master's programs for both, luxury housing, and benefits no other student in the country would dare to dream of. 2 months later, the scene had changed. The comfort of an airplane heading toward the future. Xiaomo and Bella laughed, recalling the defeated expression of Taikoku's representative